So that brings up an interesting question. So is DevSpaces an EY product? Is it specific to EYC or EYK?
Yeah, so great question. So DevSpaces is an engineered product, but it is not specific to EYC or EYK. It is specific to developers who want to develop any code anywhere and don't want to be hindered by their local machines. So I would say DevSpaces allows you to pretty much program in any language. It allows you to work with any technology, and it simplifies the way you operate. Now, we do use the engineered containers platform to allow you to deploy engineered in two modes. The first one, of course, is the public mode where you can get signed up with eyk.devspaces.com and get started kind of right away. You can sign up, start using it, no constraints. Just to realize that that is what we call a shared cluster. So in a shared cluster, we have a common cluster where you will have your isolated container. You can use it as much as you want. You operate with it, and that's kind of the operating model. There are, however, um, customers of ours who require more, greater security, more privacy. They don't want their code to be on a shared cluster. In which case, within engineered containers itself, you can provision a private cluster in which DevSpaces gets loaded. Pawan, do you want to just quickly showcase how that is done?
Yeah, yes, Tom. So when you log into Engineered, you would have a new menu structure here.
Just 1 second, Pawan. I think we don't have your screen. There it is.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you log into EYK, you would notice that there is a new menu structure which is added called DevSpaces. So if you click that, you would get an option to kind of add your own private cluster. So you could click and add DevSpace, choose the account in which it's part of, give it a name. Let's say my private cluster. You could choose what kind of architecture this cluster should have. I think the team will kind of expand more on this, be it x86 and ARM. Sometimes if you have developments specifically on ARM, we would recommend you to choose the ARM cluster because you would want to keep the dev and the prod closer on the same architecture. You could also choose which region this specific cluster should be part of, which means you could choose any one of those plethora of things. And then we have, because this being a private cluster, you could restrict the logins to this to a very specific GitHub organization, which means if all of your developers are part of your company's private GitHub org, you could specify that and then kind of restrict the logins to only that GitHub org.
Yeah. And again, I think Pawan brought up a very interesting point. We have support both for x86 architecture as well as ARM. And the reality is that the world is moving towards ARM architecture. So if you start looking at the Graviton processors and the price performance improvement that Graviton now provides, there is no doubt that everyone should really be on ARM-based, instances.